I rise in support of my amendment number 18 to H.R. 8997, which prohibits funds for the Department of Energy's implementation of its proposed Industrial Decarbonization Roadmap. The Industrial Decarbonization Roadmap radically reforms 4 different categories of CO2 emitters in the residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation sectors. We've seen this administration target residential carbon emissions by going after everything that works in your home, from gas stoves to washers and dryers to water heaters. Additionally, we've seen this administration go after the transportation sector through tailpipe emission requirements, fuel efficiency standards, and propping up the electric vehicle industry. The Industrial Decarbonization Roadmap specifically targets a few key industries that significantly contribute to the stability of our nation's economy and supply chain, namely the petroleum refining, chemicals, iron and steel, cement, and food and beverage industries. This so-called roadmap actually recommends the use of less efficient energy sources, including so-called clean energy, to ultimately replace the use of affordable and reliable energy resources. This roadmap is anti-energy independence and in favor of forced transition away from fossil fuels. According to the Department of Energy, this initiative is, quote, critical to equity goals, specifically the administration's Justice 40 initiative. However, there is nothing just about forcing millions of Americans into energy poverty. For those of my colleagues who may support this roadmap, remember that it is your fellow Americans who pay for it. One of the goals mentioned in the roadmap is, quote, to prepare the existing 11.4 million American manufacturing workers and future workforce for the clean energy transition, end quote. Mr. Chairman, I can tell you that this administration is not concerned about our workers. I recently met with coal miners in Wyoming whose livelihoods have been threatened by a recent BLM action. I asked OSMRE and the BLM in a recent hearing what their plans were to mitigate for the tens of thousands of job losses that will result from this regulation, and they couldn't answer. As the sole representative of a state whose legacy industries have been undermined by the federal government in the name of this so-called transition, I voiced my strong opposition to this roadmap. I urge passage of my amendment, and with that, I reserve. The Biden-Harris administration hasn't been shy about its distaste for American workers who provide affordable and reliable energy to the rest of the country. This administration cares more about filling the pockets of OPEC, Venezuela, and Iran than it does about energy independence, energy affordability, and energy reliability. The main component of the roadmap is a transition to what they refer to as no-carbon fuels. Not only is such a goal ludicrous and infeasible, but Americans see through these claims. The reality that this so-called no-carbon fuels receive 4 times more in subsidies and yet produce only 1/5 of the energy. They are simply unreliable and unaffordable, even with the ridiculous amount of taxpayer money being thrown at them. This so-called clean energy is completely propped up by the federal government. Figures from the U.S. Energy Information Administration show that renewables receive at least $15.6 billion in subsidies during the fiscal year 2022. Ironically, the second largest recipients of subsidies, according to the Energy Administration information, are low-income families who are struggling to pay their utility bills under this administration. And why are they struggling? They are struggling because of rising energy prices and rising utility rates that come as the result of forcing this so-called transition, forced energy poverty by an out-of-touch Biden-Harris administration. We cannot afford to pursue these failed energy policies imposed upon us by this radical administration. I ask my colleagues to join me in defunding the Department of Energy's implementation of its proposed Industrial Decarbonization Roadmap. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.